Today we're going to talk about why your corporate health days and your vision days fall flat on your face 2 days later. Matt, how are we going? I actually found you LinkedIn. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Greg. Really, it's an honour and good evening
It,
because
it, it,
it's
it
eight
is.
o'clock in Melbourne. Like
Yeah.
you're obviously a
Uh,
night owl.
it's a night out. It's a night. Yeah. It gives me. My wife gets to take care of the kids at this stage, so I'm having a bit of an out at this end. So it's great. So,
Nice,
mate,
nice.
I found your LinkedIn. You put a post up a few weeks ago about, and this really rang true for me, that a CEO told you that I put on these wellness days and these corporate days and these mental health days, but nothing's changing. I went, oh my God, thank you so much for putting that up, because the crap that's out there, and the post was so on point about the problem in corporations and business these days when they talk about mindset and mental health and mindfulness and all that kind of stuff. And someone from HR does it, or someone from Accenture does it, and understands why it falls flat on its face. Like, the post was so gold. I'll actually link it in the chat, in the video, so people can actually see the post itself. But it was gold, mate. Where did that come from? Tell me a bit about why you posted that.
Just literally, Greg, just experience. It's just the experience of doing this stuff for a long period of time, having been involved in the corporate wellbeing space for a long time. So I haven't I've been involved in the wellbeing space for 20 odd years, but I think context is useful for listeners. So back in the early 2000s, I was working in an orthopedic clinic, right? Rehab facility. I did all the fitness and post-rehab stuff in the gym. And we used to call them functional restoration programs. This is about 2003, 2004, right? Literally. And it was like back pain education, ergonomics type stuff, bit of movement. Mm-hmm. Then it kind of developed into, I only realized this a couple of years ago. And then it developed into like the exercise referral space. So I don't know if people are familiar with that. People get referred in for chronic conditions. Yeah. So we'd get our corporates sending their clients along, diabetes or pre-diabetes, hypertension, all that stuff. And then around about, and it coincides with the whole iPhone thing, around about 2010, the frame around what we were doing kind of changed. Yeah. So all of a sudden, there was this whole emphasis on how people were feeling. Stress was a word that was being tossed around. Burnout, unable, overwhelmed, people being signed off work. And this is when companies first started to going about, this is a bit of an issue. And it sort of like moved along there, and we were still using the whole, classes and movement is medicine, which it is, by the way. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss. I come from the a physical well-being background. But it kind of just moved along there, and then COVID came. And I saw this huge shift where mental health, stress, anxiety, SSRIs, all this kind of ecosystem just kind of exploded. And with it, the workplace wellbeing scene has exploded, like you said on LinkedIn. Yes. Yeah. And the fitness space has been confusing for individuals for a while. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. Instagram. You go on Instagram. Should I be doing ice baths or keto? I should be doing HIIT training, but no, I should be strength training, mindfulness. So it's like this. People are confused, and they have been for a while when it comes to physical well-being. And we have this obesity epidemic, mental health crisis, and the same thing has happened on LinkedIn and kind of in the workplace well-being space. So I'm not blaming organizations. I think organizations are trying their best, but you've got this kind of evolution, and now you've got so many different roles and people saying, actually, this stuff doesn't work, the physical well-being stuff. We tried the perks, the pizzas, the mindfulness. That doesn't work. Well, what we need you to do now is we need to sign all your leaders up to do our emotional intelligence course. That's going to fix the problem. So without going into too much detail, because it's nuanced and this stuff is depends on the individuals, the organization, the place you are in the world. But it's just become this really messy thing to understand and change. And the post was literally just like speaking to someone I see regularly and just trying to shed some of this light she's like, there's lots of different ways to tackle this.
You obviously hit a nerve because it had over 250 comments on it.
I know. And I've been talking about this stuff, Greg. I was surprised. I was like, I've been talking about this for a while.
It's like you nuked the whole of LinkedIn. It was like, holy shit.
I know. I said to my wife, I was like, what's going on? It was actually becoming irritating. Every time I went on LinkedIn, there was more comments and more posts. I was like, oh, for God's sake, I've got to go back on there now. And because you told, haven't you, you've got to reply to comments. But yeah, it hit a nerve. And I also don't take full credit. I just think the algorithm pushed it out. It's maybe a message that I just thought everyone in the space was talking about. And obviously they're not. People are as confused as they were before.
They may be not talking about it, but they're definitely feeling it.
Yeah.
And then that's, I can speak from 25 years experience in that space, right? It's like one of the points you put in that post was most people are actually stressed out because of their managers and the workload. And you can do as much as do talk like, and I think you may have mentioned to me, it's like while we're having morning tea about are you okay day and patting each other on the back about cupcakes, half an hour later they're back at their desk stressed out about their workload. Yeah.
It's the biggest drivers of stress. And again, people will question whether or not your sources for this, McKinsey, people question that, or is it Gallup? Well, the research is the research, and it's suggesting based off what people are looking at that workload, environment, and your manager or your leader, but definitely your direct managers, they have the biggest influence over your well-being.
Yeah.
I think there's a stat that says 76% of employees say that their manager, their direct line manager, has as much influence over their well-being as their therapist or their doctor, and it's equal with their life partner. So the reason I throw that out there is not to blame leaders and managers, but just go, by the way, you have a pretty big role to play in this thing we call workplace well-being.
Yeah. And look, Matt and I have caught up outside of this, people, so we've actually had a chat about this outside of this. My thing is that, and I think you probably tended to agree when we chatted last, that I think it's unfair on the managers to be tainted with this kind of stick, because a lot of these managers in these positions, because they got there because they could deliver outcomes, they're not equipped to deal with the emotional intelligence EQ space. Because again, I think this is might be a McKinsey kind of stat. 10% of people are actually naturally born leaders. 90% aren't. And you've got people in leadership positions who have got there through delivering outcomes, but have zero clue about understanding how human behavior works. And when you understand that, like, okay, right, we're putting all this pressure onto our managers, but they don't have, one, the time, nor the skill set to actually implement any of it. And then the CEO goes, it's not working, but I pay all this money for this advisor to come in and talk about this, but nothing's working.
I know. And I think as well, it goes back to what I said before, like people are on LinkedIn, leaders and C-suite types are on LinkedIn, and they're seeing all these posts about, the impact of stress on productivity, on profitability, on staff turnover. So now they're just shining the lens, normally on HR, to be fair, sort this out. And it's like, okay, and then the HR are getting on the managers, and like you said, they're not equipped. People are normally promoted because they're experienced in a role, the role and the job, and then they're promoted into this new role, which is coaching. And they wonder why they're not equipped to manage their staff in the correct way now, because 20 years ago it wasn't like that. It wasn't even on the radar.
Correct. And then that was like a good segue there, is your second post or second part of that post was it's outsourced to HR. And HR, I'm sorry for all the HR people out there I'm going to offend with this comment, but HR aren't there for people, they're there for the company. They're there to protect the company from HR stuff, right? Yeah. They're not necessarily there for the employees in great detail. Now, people are going to go, upset a few people in that comment, but that's probably, I've got a few HR friends and they kind of behind the scenes agree with that. Again, it's not a HR problem, because again, these people are HR specialists. They're not human behavior specialists. They're two different things. And we quite often confuse human behavior specialists with HR specialists. They're not the same. Human resources and human resources are not the same. They're apples and oranges, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we forget that, just goes back to what you said before, is like a lot of managers are struggling with the same issues that staff are struggling with. So they're under chronic stress, they're nearing burnout, so their cognitive function isn't firing in all capacities. So, if you're a chronically stressed HR manager and you're getting it from both sides, guess what? Executive function shuts down. You're more reactive, you're more sympathetic tone, amygdala type reactions. And I've seen it in organizations, Greg, where it's kind of us and them. It's like HR, all they're getting is they're just getting the angst from people below. They're getting angst from senior team, and they're not in a well space to react in the correct way. And this is where I think, we get wellbeing roles within organizations, or we get consultants, people like me or you, who go in and we're just an ear roll for HR. We're just to bounce ideas. Am I doing the right thing, Matt? So yeah, it's a complicated world. There's lots of stuff going on. When you layer in people and different cultures, it's like there is no quick fix.
And you mentioned a good point there about stress. And I think as human beings, we need a level of stress to push ourselves, and we need that. Like if you go to the gym, you need to stress and tear your muscles for them to grow, right? So we need an inherent level of stress in our lives. But what happens to the human body, and what happens to your performance, just in layman's terms for people who don't know, if you are in a heightened state of stress over a period of time, what happens to someone's brain function and performance?
Yeah, it's this whole thing of adaptive to maladaptive stress. And I don't think managers understand the science. And that's where I think educational workshops can be helpful.
Exactly.
If they're delivered and, they're given managers that understand the physiology, the neurophysiology connection, and then you implement policies off the back of it. And I think that's kind of where I'm at the moment in terms of what I'm delivering in organizations. It's kind of realizing that the whole tick box approach isn't working. It's not to say we just rule it out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, no, physical well-being is very much needed. And certain people within the organization, it would really help boost their performance, their mental health, all that stuff. But I think what's happened is, when we go back to sort of 2010 and even COVID, it's insane, Greg. This whole, when does work stop, start, emails, demands, expectations, that really for me it's like the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So it's like, we've got to work on our managers' emotional intelligence. We've got to create a culture of psychological safety. Yeah, it's cool. It's going to take some time. That's really not simple. You're going to get lots and lots of pushback on that. But guess what? There's some frameworks and policies and procedures that we can implement around the work, which nobody seems to be doing. It's incredible, Greg. It baffles me. I'm just like, really? Like a group of adults could sit down in an organization and figure some stuff out. And the stuff that I normally implement is stuff like right to disconnect, minimizing distractions, like a simple change like that. I've seen it. It's remarkable. It turns up in all the engagement scores. It turns up in pulse surveys. It's just there. And that's kind of where I start with companies.
Like you said, it's as simple as like we used to call it context switching, which is you never got to do a job more than 3 minutes at a time. And I think there's I hate these terminologies, but you're having these people come up with we're having monk mode this week. And you get to spend it used to be, what was it called, time boxing? It was called time boxing a while ago, where you're going, okay, you've got 3 hours, block your diary out, no distractions, you've got this one job. And that breeds so much, level of depth of performance, rather than actually having someone who's context switching every 3 minutes to read a new email. You're all over the place, nothing gets done. Because, your inbox has got 400 emails in there you're meant to be able to read, and everyone's CCing you and all that kind of stuff. So, like you said, there's really simple techniques you can actually implement that are around the current workloads.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I'll tell you, when it first came on my radar, I did an off-site 2 years ago in the UK. I was back for the summer. My wife's a teacher, so we leave the desert in Dubai and we escape the heat. And I did this off-site with a friend's real estate agency. Huge, all the offices came in. And it was lovely. It was, they got to connect, and we did some stress management stuff and some breath work. And it wasn't even scheduled, but the owner of the company was there, which is important. Leaders need to be there, they need to be present, engaging with these wellbeing initiatives. And I just tossed the whole right to disconnect thing out. It's like a little hand grenade. I just, off the cuff, I just chucked it out there and created a discussion. Now, I wouldn't do this normally with an organization. I'd normally sit with leaders first and say, by the way, we're going to have a chat about this. Yeah, not just drop it on them. But it started this discussion, and it became like a task for like half an hour, and the people that were doing the work sat down. It was unbelievable, Greg. It was like WhatsApp groups, Slack channels. People were getting messages they shouldn't. Was anyone really switching off? No. I think there's a statistic, 70% of people are looking at emails after 10 p.m. or before they get out of bed. It's like this hideous world. And nobody seems to be doing anything with it. So they sat down and they kind of spoke about it. They spoke about what worked, what didn't work, emergency protocols. So obviously you get your rejected. People are going to hit back management. What happens if we're client facing? We can sort that out.
Yes.
And it was so powerful. I met one of my friends who worked for the organisation a couple of weeks later in Edinburgh. There's an arts festival called the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland.
Yep.
Amazing. So we were up there, me and my wife. My friend Terry came up. He'd been on holiday for a week. Met him for breakfast. He just arrived on the train in the morning. How you doing, mate? How did that thing land the other week? Oh, yeah, people loved it. Did you implement any of the stuff? Yeah. Have you looked at your... No, I haven't looked at my email for a week, Matt. I was like, oh, okay, cool. He said, that's the first time in 20 years I haven't been engaged with work when I'm on holiday. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm like, how does it feel? He said, I feel like I'm on holiday. And it's just like, and it just took a conversation around this stuff. And if workload and productivity are a problem, then we can do stuff. And it also, I think if you implement something in the office or right to disconnect, and it takes time, you got to stick to it, and it might not work. It might be, we have to change it. But you can create that trust with some low hanging stuff before you start to push the boat out and challenge managers about behavior and communication styles. It's just like, show your organization that we're committed to you. We want to make the work easier. And when we say something, or if you give us feedback from a survey, or at least acknowledging that we've received it and then we're taking some action.
It's funny because all the stats, like you said, the Gartner stuff and Gallup and everything like that, they back it up. All the stats back it up. There's Harvard studies, there's Yale studies, everything. We can pull studies from anywhere. But why won't businesses actually invest in? Then I say the word invest because there is a cost to this. Why don't they actually invest in it properly?
It's an interesting one. It goes back to, when I said the corporate wellbeing space has become a bit like the whole fitness wellbeing space. I just think, I don't know, that is the $100 million question. It's like, let's talk about, like, we've got Ozempic and we've got pharmacological interventions now around this obesity epidemic. It's like, eat less, move more. It sounds very simple. It's not. It's complicated. And I think this is where I think when it comes to policies and procedures at work, it has to. This is where the value, it has to come from the top. I mean, it really does. And these behaviours have to be modelled. And I know you're going to come onto my podcast and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about how we fix the individual. But I don't know. What I've realised now is, before I work with an organisation, I want to spend time with management, senior team, C-suite, CEO. I want them in a room for 3 hours to have a conversation. It's kind of where it's shifted now, because hopefully you lay it out in a way that makes sense. You give them the opportunity to ask questions, to connect dots, to push back maybe, and get an understanding. And then also what I do is I finish the session by saying, by the way, I need you guys on board. Like I let them know how important they are. In a way, it's kind of, it's almost not massaging their ego, but it's telling them how important they are and how much influence they have. And again, you get outliers, you get people that push back and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a sort of gut feel that people are afraid of change because, like, again, it's like if a company was really broken, then they go, right, we need to change this up completely. We need to actually take some action now and change the whole culture, and because the whole thing's falling apart, otherwise we'll go bankrupt, right? When you look at major corporations, most of them are doing okay. So there's not really a pushing need. They can go away with the fact is that we're still making our whatever profit. We have a staff turnover of so much. We know there's an issue, but we can actually ignore it because nothing's really broken too much at this stage, and people sort of, unfortunately, that position that your good staff will leave, and then what you're left with are the people who can't leave, and then all of a sudden the performance of the business starts to suffer because those people who can leave will, because for a better environment, and then it starts to fall apart. But I think people in from a human behavior perspective are afraid of what this actually does because they don't understand it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think when you implement any change, it has to be small. It has to be achievable, and you have to stick to your guns. So, I'll often work with organizations, and we'll plan out off the back of a leader's program. We'll plan a wellbeing strategy for 6 months to a year. Yeah. We'll break it into, Q1, Q2, Q3, etc. But I might just say to them, look, let's have, for Q1, all we're going to work on is we're going to nail this thing of right to disconnect. Yeah. And they go, okay, we can do that. Yeah. Don't worry about the other stuff. Yes, if you want to have a little class at weekends, or you want to give gym membership, absolutely fine. But let's nail this stuff. And by the way, people will veer off the path, a bit like someone who's on a fitness journey and they eat loads of chocolate at the weekend. It happens. You get back on the horse.
You've been watching me, haven't you?
Yes. We're all the same, Greg. But this is it. You make it, and the people at the top have to. We're going to do this, and like you say, it's reframing it. It's a business strategy. So we're going to stick to right to disconnect. Very quickly, you give people a slap on the hand. The ones that are emailing at 10 p.m. and IT can help, and there's ways of managing this. And I think quite often that's the challenge. People they understand the value, but they don't know where to start. So I'll give you an example. I did it recently with not just C-suite, it was just a group. The whole department were there. How many didn't know when they were asked how to send an out-of-office hours signature? How to delay their email sending? And I know it sounds really straightforward and surely, but lots of people in that room didn't know how to do it. So it's almost like you've got to roll it all the way back, and you've got to hold people's hands. And this is where the whole psychological safety thing comes in. But look, if we're all pulling in this direction, and we're doing it for a reason, and we're doing it for you, and we're doing it for the business, people will email at 10 p.m, bring them in. By the way, we don't do this at this organisation anymore. It's just what we do. And you might get people, I'm not working here, I'll go elsewhere. Okay, cool. And then what happens is when you onboard people into the organisation, it's become a norm of the organisation. So people slot into that organisation. It's just what we do here. And I kid you not, any organisation I know that's tried to implement it or already implements it, what does it boost? The reputation of your company. Like
$1,000,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. You nail that. And then the staff go, God, we did that. I trust this lot. Okay, cool. What you got next?
The magic word. You mentioned the magic word. Trust. That's huge. Because when you have that, then you can start really making some profound changes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's trust and even rolling it back a little bit further, just being heard. It baffles me when you go into organizations and you speak to staff, like wellbeing groups. I've worked with loads of organizations and they've got a wellbeing committee. They send me in, I go in, I go, all right, hello, I'm Matt. We have a chat. How you been getting on? What are your plans? What have you nailed? It's like nothing's really changed. I go, well, how does it work? We get together, we get feedback in, we try and keep it as anonymous as possible.
Yeah. We all know who it is, though.
Yeah, no one's saying anything. And we send it upstream and it bounces back. And then you go, okay, cool. And then you go back in with the senior team and you go, we've got to sort this out. Let's give them a small win. And actually, that's why I think it's important to work with leaders first.
Yeah.
Be in a room with leaders, because let's say I mentioned something like, I don't know, let's get that right to disconnect thing. I mean, I'm all over it, but I just think it's so easy to implement and so powerful. When you throw that at a senior team, you can say to them, look, this, and they can sit and have a think, could this actually work? Yeah, how would it work? What would be let's discuss it. Okay, cool. You guys are on board. Now, I run a session around stress management, a lunch and learn, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Yep. Leaders are there, teams are there. And I bring up this concept and I connect it to stress and physiology and why being in a task positive network at 10 p.m. at night probably isn't good for their career well-being and productivity and performance and sleep. Correct. And they go, oh, okay, I get that. And then they're looking at their leaders. The leaders are in the corner. They're thinking, oh, they're not going to like this. Or you watch, we get nothing out of this lot. But unbeknown to them, the leaders already know. We're all over this and we're going to take action. And Matt's worked on a 4-step plan. Yes. And it finishes. And guess what? Off the back of that workshop, stuff starts happening. Trust is gained.
Trust.
And then you get momentum. And then that bloke from South London appears again. And they go, oh, what you got for us this time, Matt? I go, we're going to do a bit of breathing. And this is why it's useful.
Are we addicted to it, though? Like, I mean, some of us love... I mean, I'm 50, right? I've been through, generational change the way, workplaces work. When I first started, you got the golden watch for being there for 45, 50 years. When I first started in the bank, my bank manager had been there 35 years and he got the chance to, he wrote loans. He actually didn't write, but he actually approved them or not approved them, right? Didn't go off to some computer in that said yes or no. It's changed so much, but are we addicted to the busyness of our lives?
100%. And this is why I think, I mean, I've taught in the past, and I've still got it. It's a workshop I run, and it's, minimizing distractions or digital minimalism. And again, that is a massive issue in itself. And this is where I think staff need support from the workplace, because if nobody's policing it, people don't mean to do it, but they've got 15 tabs open. They've got their phone on the desk. There's this thing called dopamine, which is we like a bit of dopamine.
Doom scrolling, mate. Doom scrolling. We love it.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. So people are trying to not look at emails after 10 p.m. because as an organisation, we've agreed it might not be useful. But this is where you have to support people and say, well, maybe for these, I'm going to Gen Z or Gen Alphas that are coming along, maybe you need a separate phone. But you're right. I think the whole checking an email, it's a really complicated thing. And I think people need support.
Well, because we've had the whole hustle culture go through. Like we've had the Gary Vee stuff, which, you only need 3 hours sleep a night. Go seriously, do not listen to that dude. Great stuff, but don't. If anyone's telling you, like, I had this argument with someone once, and they were bragging about, they were doing pictures of they're up at 4 a.m., they're doing their ice bath meditation, they're journaling and stuff. I mean, what are you doing, Greg? I'm asleep. I am asleep because my most important stuff is sleep, and everything else behind that will come off that thing, right? So I think that we've also been taught as a society that the hustle culture is somewhat, if you don't do it, then you're underperforming as well too.
I know. It's really complicated. And I think stuff like, I don't know, let's say in the office environment, it's just another sort of policy or procedure, but like minimizing distractions. So you mentioned before, you referenced switch costs. So, if someone emails you upstairs and you check that email, that breaks your workflow. People are not getting stuff done. They're not sleeping because they've got this weird thing going on at night, and then they're not getting work done, so they're taking work home with them. They're never switching off. The cognitive cost. It's like when I sit in front of groups of leaders, a question I often throw out to them, especially the ones that are hitting back. We're a busy organisation, Matt. We've got clients. This is not law firms are a prime example. It's time. They punch in time.
Yeah.
I'm kind of backing away from those guys. But I quite often say to groups of leaders, like, before I start dropping this stuff, because they all think it might be fluffy and it's this generation and we worked hard and but I just say to them, what do you pay your staff for? And they sort of sit there and some of them go, well, to deal with clients or to run spreadsheets or whatever it is. And I go, no, scratch deeper. What is it? What's the asset you pay for in the knowledge sector? And like 20 years ago, or probably longer, 50 years ago, physicality, laying bricks, it's not that, is it? The knowledge sector, it's cognitive function.
Yeah.
Like that's the asset. So I say so you pay this guy $500,000 a year. He's a senior member in your team. What do you pay him for? You pay him for his cognitive function.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they go, oh, okay. So you need to protect that asset. That's the asset to the organisation.
That is so good, mate. That is brilliant.
It's true. And it's like the physical stuff. Like Cristiano Ronaldo, he plays football here in the Middle East. He's in Saudi, right? He's paid massive amounts of money. When Cristiano Ronaldo, even though he's 40 as well, when he comes off the pitch, right, the football team don't say, right, off to the gym, Cristiano, you're going to do 6 hours of lifting and cardio and hit. No, Cristiano goes home, he sits down, he has a massage, he eats, he sleeps. Why? Because his asset to the organisation is his physical capability. And your asset to the organisation is your cognitive function. Or if you flip it and you take, look, the company doesn't really care about me. I get it. I'm on a 4-year contract, 5-year contract. It's a suicide mission, right? It's a law firm. I'm
a mercenary, yep.
I'm $3 million, $4 million a year, suicide mission, but at the end of it, I'm going to bank it and live off the interest.
Correct.
Cool. I get it.
Yeah.
Right. So for you as an individual, personal responsibility, your cognitive function is your asset. Yes. Like career well-being. I want to turn up at work and perform well. And this is how I reframe it for individuals. When they say, well, my organization's not helping me, it was like, well, career well-being is the number one predictor of overall well-being. If you are performing well in your job, it filters into all the other areas.
If you're not performing well at your job, what happens outside those areas?
Exactly. So I tried to say to people, like, here's your why, Simon Sinek thing, but like, here's your why as to why you might want to start disconnecting, why you might want to go for a walk at lunchtime. Like, I haven't got time for that, Matt. I haven't got time for that. I'm busy. Okay. And you give them statistics. You say, by the way, when you go for a 40-minute walk at lunchtime, you are 50% more creative when you get back for the first hour. You explain the role of adrenaline, cortisol, and glucose. Yep. Why stress is called the silent killer. Then you see the boys in the room that have got families, young kids, you start going, oh, okay. Oh, I never knew that, Matt. Oh, is that why they call it a silent killer? Yes.
The number one driver for most diseases, stress.
Exactly. Inflammation, mate. Inflammation is the driver of all chronic conditions. It influences brain structure.
And how long does it take? I think I read this somewhere, but an hour's worth of very high adrenaline and cortisol, how long does it take to regulate your body back to being in the parasympathetic?
Depends what you're doing,
hours or something, isn't it?
Well, it depends. Like, let's say if you're sat at your computer answering emails and you've got this low-level psychological stress ticking over, you've got this constant chemical soup in your body. Yeah. Now, this is the thing that blew my mind when it comes to all this physiology of stress stuff. So there's a guy called Joe Dispenza. You'd be familiar with Joe Dispenza as well, right?
Joe,
So I heard Joe Dispenza say this, and it blew my mind. He said, thoughts create feelings, feelings create thoughts. So just for listeners, your brain doesn't know the difference between an actual threat, lion, and a perceived threat, thinking about your boss firing you. Same physiological response.
Yep.
So you sit there for 20 odd years, you don't move, your adrenal glands keep pumping out these chemicals. The cells in your body become addicted to that chemical soup. That is your homeostasis. That's where you live. That's where your nervous system wants to bring you back to. So your physiology, the cells in your body, start to dictate your neurology, your reactions to the world. So you go and do a half-day course, mantra, your wife's got you doing breath work at work and you're thinking positively.
Well, ice baths,
doing nothing, Greg, because your cells in your body are going, we want more of the good stuff.
Yes.
So you get more miserable.
Yes.
Your amygdala and the relationship between your amygdala and your hippocampus, which is quite important for emotional regulation, that changes. So you become more miserable, more reactive to the world, more adrenaline, more cortisol. It's frightening.
And it's right because you're exactly right, but you're doing all the right things by doing meditation and yoga and ice baths and journaling and affirmations, and it's doing jack shit.
I know. Well, I would say it has a part, but like you say, what's the fundamental? What are those chemicals for? That adrenaline and cortisol and glucose is pumped out. This is why stress-related diabetes is a thing. It's designed to get you to move.
Yeah.
So you have to get people to recognize that and go, if you want to perform better cognitively, you better get that inflammation out your brain. Go for
Well, the
a
other
walk,
thing is like
metabolize it.
you got your blood flow that goes to your limbs and away from your gut. So again, like your second brain is your gut. There's no blood there. You don't digest anything.
No, exactly. And this is why the corporate well-being space has become so, and I get it, why leaders and HR directors, they're confused because like, where do we start? And like, I saw that post saying that it's a waste of time running a yoga class at lunchtime. No, it's not a waste of time. It could be really useful, but and certain staff will really value that, and that will create loyalty to the company. It will improve engagement, but it can't be the only thing. It can't be the only thing. But this is why I start organizations with the policies and procedures, because you lay that framework that covers everyone. The work is quite important. That's why people are there. All this family and all that.
It's a great angle you've got, because I'm glad you said that, because most people and most businesses are going to, well, anyone who listens to this are going to listen back to that statement you said about business leaders when they go, I can't got time for this. I'm too busy. Everyone's too busy. We haven't got time to invest in this. And the way you answered that was pure beauty. It's like Shakespearean poetry, what you just put out, because in that moment, you've actually you smacked them between the eyeballs and gone whack with that ability to go, okay, right, what's your biggest asset? And that's just, they can't ignore that.
No. And I think this is why it gets confusing for organizations, because as I said at the beginning of the conversation, I've kind of been around the corporate space. I've been in the wellbeing space long enough. It's been something that I've been involved in. It has changed and developed, but there seems to be this whole thing now where we've got some really exceptional movement teachers and nutritionists and meditation teachers who really understand their craft and are bright and understand and connect dots. But it's almost like they're on one side of a bit like our politics now, a bit like everything. It's polarized. It's like there's no space for this stuff. It's a waste of time. It's like a good friend of mine, Dr. Brendan Stubbs, right? He's a leading researcher on anxiety, depression, mental health, and exercise, right? Hundreds of papers. It's like, it's undeniable that if you improve the physical well-being or the nutritional environment, whatever you want to call it in your workplace, it's going to be beneficial. But it can't be the only thing, because it comes down to, that's lovely, but you've got a bit of a dickhead managing you.
And I think those managers have also been burnt by people who, and look, I've seen the glossy brochures from people who, how do I say this without offending people? Don't care. People out there who don't know what they're doing. They do think that having a timeout or a yoga study or a bit of breath work will actually fix everything. And they've gone and paid these people a lot of money to actually not fix anything. And I think some managers are a bit gun shy about investing in something like this again without knowing about, well, am I actually buying the same thing again where I've just got this consultant in and they've talked and done a few PowerPoint presentations and then nothing's really changed.
No, I think it's such a valid point you make. And there's a few guys, because I still do some of the physical well-being stuff. So I still train people in the gyms, and a couple of the guys are CEOs. Right, so they're coming to me and I train them in the gym and they turn up and I'm like, do you want me to educate? No, Matt, I'm too busy. Just accountability. If you're there, I'll train. Right, we train, have a good relationship with them. But one of the guys, the CEO of an engineering firm, and I was talking to him, and he's got a young child. He's got a baby on the way. He's CEO. He's busy. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, we've been training for a while, and all we did was, it was obviously weight loss was the goal. I want to look a bit more shredded. I get that, but it was a bit like our Q1, like right to disconnect goal. It's like, for this first 12 weeks before Christmas, I just want you to nail the habit of training regularly, because that seems to be all over the place. He's now nailed the training, like the habit of training. sees me, he goes to reformer Pilates, twice resistance training, 2 reformer Pilates, walks. That's it. You've ticked the boxes there, mate. You're covering the bases. Still trying to get him walk at lunchtime, but that's a work in progress.
Daylight is important sometimes, but yes,
absolutely. But I asked him how this stuff shows up in his life. So I said, have a think. I said, how is this? This was a couple of months back. But how does this stuff show up in your life? And he sat and he's paused. He's quite a reflective guy, and he said, he's an Aussie, by the way. And he said, I'm less angry with my staff. And I went to him, mate, that is so powerful, what you just said. And he was like, really? And I have said to him at one stage, I might clip that up and put it as a LinkedIn post, because that's like when people are saying it's a waste of time. But actually the point I was trying to make, I'm going off a bit here, is that what you just said about leaders is really important. And although I'm doing this one-to-one stuff, I think there is possibly an area in organizations where they go, do you know what? Our staff being physically well, our leaders being physically well is really important, because it's all downstream from there. So if they have been jacked up on adrenaline and cortisol and poor eating patterns and they're not sleeping right, they're not functioning cognitively. So it's like, right, sorry, Tom. Tom's been C-suite. He's a really senior person. I'm above you, right? KPIs, we're changing it. You are going to the gym twice a week. What are you talking about? You can't do that. It's like honestly, it would be a remarkable investment. Wouldn't cost a lot. When you think about the money that the people spend, but you've got to be able to go in and convince leaders of the physiological stuff. And I mean, I've just been blessed. I've been in the fitness space and I've done teacher training to understand it. But that is a really important aspect. Work on those guys first, get them sorted, and then downstream from there.
Has to flow downstream, because at the stage when they make the change, they won't accept that from anything below them either, right? So that's the point, is that if you want to be able to have the culture you want, it has to start from the top. Because if you're expecting your staff to do it and you're not doing it, there's no trust there. You're not going to work.
Doesn't work, and the stats support it. I think uptake for wellbeing initiatives is like it's 86% when managers are on board. So even if it's something like a spinning class or whatever, like the Pilates class before lunch, if the leaders are turning up, people are turning up anyway. There's a sense of connection. And I think wellbeing initiatives, where leaders are not engaged, they fail after 2 years. Yeah, it don't work.
Yeah, it doesn't. Let's end this on a good note. What's some of the most important things that you could if someone wanted to implement this stuff now, apart from the disconnect part, what's some of the things they can put in place right now to actually start shifting culture?
First thing I would do is I would get the leaders together in a room. That's where I would start. Together. Yeah. Yeah, no, I would. Yep. I would start and I would block out time in the diary and get the leaders in a room. And I'd give people the overview, because it's so confusing. People don't know where to start. So give them a landscape. Then I would say it's about data. So Peter Drucker talks about it. If it's not like measured, you can't track progress. So you have to, then this is why you have to get teams together and go, where's our start point? I'll give you an example, right? You came to me, you said, oh, Matt, I want to get in shape. I want to get ripped and I want to lose some weight. And I just said, oh, that's great, Greg. Right, here we go. On the treadmill, do a 5K. No, what I would do is I would do some measurements. I go, how much do you weigh now, mate? Oh, I weigh this. What's your body fat percentage? And let's track it. So I would say organisations need to look at stuff like, and if they can't, if I said to them, show me your absenteeism rate and reasons for it, you would be blown away by how many organisations don't keep track of that stuff.
Nope.
And I would honestly say, it's like you have to find out what staff turnover rates. And if you go, HR go, and it's not HR's fault. It's why I try not to do it at these leaders' meetings when HR are there, but have a conversation before. It's like, if you're not doing this stuff, like this is probably the best place to start. So I said to someone, I want to get in shape. It's like, have you got any trainers? No, I've got no trainers. Have you got to join a gym? No. Oh, okay, you're going to join one. Well, I haven't really thought about that yet. It's like, so I would say actually looking at rates, looking at stuff that's been measured, implement something because it not everything's going to work. Implement something and look for feedback. And it's a process. It's a process. It's just something that you small steps, achievable goals, change direction as you go. That's kind of, but the whole where we're at the moment, or where we are in terms of measurements, is where I would start.
Now, for those of my friends that live in Australia, Matt's in Dubai, but I'm sure he'd be able to help you out no matter what. If you pay him enough money, he'll probably fly over here as well too. So, Matt, how do we get in touch with you?
Wellness Education Dubai, which is not going to be a very useful term when I do eventually move back to London. I'm on Instagram, Wellness Education Dubai, LinkedIn. I've got a website. I've got a podcast, which you are about to hop onto, the Marney podcast. I do online stuff. I've done a few things in Saudi last week. I run all these workshops. I do one-to-one coaching. I do the leaders program. Is this, get C-suite in a room, have a chat, start the plan. I teach mindfulness. If they want a bit of mindfulness, I do all the fitness stuff. I just like this well-being stuff. I've got a Buddhist background, so it's all about reducing dukkha and suffering and putting a bit of positivity in the world, my friend.
Perfect. All right, we'll put the links down below. People, I hope you enjoyed this. This was excellent. Matt, we'll definitely have you on again because there's a whole lot of different conversations we can have going forward. And if you want to reach out, comment below. I'm sure Matt would answer any questions you got, but don't forget to subscribe and tune in next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg. Pleasure.